one of the things that at our conference, the BC Summit, we found over the years for asking and trying to help people understand a company's product and positioning is if we'd ask them to use a case study as a description of their product and their company. And so that's what I'd like to start with. And John, we'll start with you, is just basically share with us a case study that kind of exemplifies your product and the use cases and how you're building that around team collaboration. And we'll just go right down the line and let everybody answer that same question.
Yeah, a typical situation for team collaboration is when a service technician goes to a customer site. There's a need for inspecting, maybe for replacing some hardware assets. And in that particular case, that person needs help from the back office. So the person is able to connect to the back office asking for help. Maybe there's further help needed from the customer side. So there's a collaboration between the company and the customer of the company. And so now 3 people with different roles in different places are using multimodality of a team collaboration solution.
That's an interesting use case. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. That's actually my favorite part of the job, is to meet customers and talk about the use cases. It's going to be difficult to narrow it down to 1 minute, though. First, one of our typical use cases is incident response. We have companies like Capital One, Oracle, and Oath who have actually integrated into applications, in Oath's case, like ServiceNow, where a ticket will come in and it will automatically spawn off a channel, bring in the right expertise to discuss and triage. Another use case in media is the LA Times, for instance, which have integrated into their CMS, their content management system, in order to actually produce and publish news. And then finally, Everlane, they're an online retailer. They're using a new feature that we call shared channels, where they connect actually with their vendor, Happy Returns. And so when a return comes in and there's any information missing, the vendor and the retailer can connect together and solve the use case or solve the incident quickly.
Great. Well, thank you. Kara, what's going on with Ring Central?
So a couple of examples that I want to give, and one of my favorites is a company that's been a customer of ours, was called Structural Group. And it's an engineering construction company with 2,500 employees and about 30 production centers around the world. They use Ring Central to collaborate and communicate. They go from voice to video to sharing blueprints, and they do this from back office to being able to do this on a mobile device, on their smart device. Their business is hanging off a scaffolding and making marks, and so they're able to use Ring Central in all the modalities. And they tell us that with us, they've been able to reduce the time to review blueprints from something like 2 days to 20 minutes. Some of you have similar problems, probably not hanging from a scaffolding, but the same expediency is required in your business, and Ring Central enables that. Another quick example is Pacific Dental Group. They are thousands of employees, about 700 offices, serving small dental offices. And they deployed our solutions again from voice to video to team collaboration, all working from any device or anywhere that they are. And their specific need is when they're communicating with customers, they're infusing team collaboration with SMS to basically confirm appointments. And because Ring Central, for example, is HIPAA compliance for healthcare, they can do that.
Great.
Those are couples.
So, Lori, Teams is the new kid on the block, I think. You're almost a year old.
That's right.
Could you give us some examples of some of the case studies that you've discovered over the last year?
Sure can. Yeah, our 1-year anniversary for Teams is on Wednesday. So
I wasn't going to try to give that away. I was going to save that one.
Yeah, so we're a year into this and just have a lot of really terrific production use cases and stories, ranging from small companies up to the largest companies in the world. Today, we just put out a case study from General Motors. General Motors is now using Teams, and it's really exciting to see how they're using it. But there's one recent story that I just love that I wanted to share with you all today, and it's a company called Red Lion Hotels. And Red Lion Hotels was a Pacific Northwest regional hotel chain with about 60 hotels. And in a 3-year period, they went from 60 hotels to 1,100 hotels, becoming a national chain. And they realized that they needed the tools to actually help them in this journey. They needed to change the way they were communicating, break down from just using email and point-in-time communications, and really focus more on ad hoc, real-time collab that they could do knowledge share really quickly, they could find the experts, they could keep the whole organization moving along this journey. And so they chose Teams because they were already using the Office 365 suite. They had Power BI, they had Azure, and with all of it together, it just really made sense. And they could also plug in their third-party applications. And so the CEO, Greg Mount, he did something that I just think is fantastic. And he put an email autoresponder on that said, "Should you send this to Teams?" ? And we was really trying to force and change the behavior of his employees to make sure they were right-sizing email and putting the communication where it needed to be. And so Teams has really been foundational to their growth, and it's exciting to see their success.
Great, thanks. Well, Jonathan, I always view Jonathan as the father of Spark. So you want to take that on. So you obviously got a lot of insight since it's your baby.
Right. So we all have great stories to share about successful use cases, and I think I share your view that's sort of the exciting way to look at it. The one I think we're probably most jazzed about is the Olympics. So like everybody loves the Olympics, right? So NBC Universal was actually using Cisco Spark to manage the media coverage for the Olympics. So they had this cool idea of making Spark space for every event that needed to be covered, and it was sort of almost like a war room type of model where everyone who was involved in that particular piece of coverage would get in the space and they would share messages, files, and then they'd have like live calls. So one of them sent me a screenshot with they had 20 live call buttons where they could move back and forth between these different meetings, and I thought that was just so awesome. So a really great use case, sort of an incident response type of thing, but not on the technical side. Another totally different use case that we've had a lot of success for was in retail. So we have a large U.S. retailer that has tens of thousands of U.S. Retail stores, and they had a need for what I would call in-store chat. Their employees had all kinds of chit-chat and chatter amongst them that was really high bandwidth, and then they needed a way to formalize communications back to the corporate office, whatever. So they used Cisco Spark, and they rolled it out to all the retail locations, and then they created spaces for each branch office, whatever, and they created this sort of organizational construct around the spaces to help them get in-store communications and get the information they needed from the back office. So that was pretty cool, too.
Great. Thanks. Well, Atlassian's certainly been around for a while. In fact, along with Slack, it seems like you two got a lot of this stuff going. So give us some of your use cases.
Thanks, Jim. Great examples, John and llan. Incident response is one of our favorite use cases, especially with the assets we have, Jira and Confluence. It's something we've been focused on for a long time. But I'm going to just give a couple of examples that I think are sort of differentiated in a way that we think about the market now in 2018. So the first one is a company called MedTrainer. And what they use Stride for is they deployed it to everyone in the enterprise. And when you come into the enterprise, you get Stride. And because we've built in collaboration tools, the task management right into the application, they're able to get people started very quickly, the onboarding process for the entire enterprise, all their talent. You can build task management as an app that you can download from the App Store into these tools, but because we've tried to build the basics of collaboration inside Stride, they're able to do that as a way to sort of consolidate the ability to get people up to speed very fast. The other thing I want to talk about is another company that I think a lot of people know who has sort of built things on LAMP stacks, Postgres. They just adopted Stride, and one of the things they use it for is focus mode, right? We've built something into the application that allows you to mute the application in a way that also tells your team what you're working on seamlessly. And because of that, they say that they've reclaimed thousands and thousands of hours of developer productivity by using Stride. So those are things that we think about right now, and those are great examples for us for our strategy.
Great, thank you. Beth?
So I'm kind of curious. I would say that you would all mostly agree that team collaboration is it can be a transformative experience for companies, right? So if this is sort of the underlying meeting place, becomes the underlying meeting place, how do you intend to make that happen? I mean, it's one thing to sit up here and talk about your great tools, but how are you making that happen within the enterprise and in a pervasive fashion?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I mean, one of the things that we are doing, we announced last September, as many of you know, that we were taking Skype for Business and bringing that into Teams. So within Office 365, the Skype for Business client goes away and Teams becomes the hero client going forward. And that's because we believe that collabs and communication are inextricably linked. And going forward, we continue to look and say, how do we build on this foundation, taking the decade of learning from the Skype infrastructure, being able to build this next generation platform, and be able to truly roll this out sitting on top of the Office productivity suite. Okay.
So I'll jump in. I think actually the journey is for a lot of customers the hard part.
Right.
Sort of like everything's great if you could just junk everything else and go to this new thing, but that doesn't happen. Every office has got many generations of tools from us, from you, from other vendors on here. It's voice products, it's video products of many generations. Still walk into company offices and see stuff with Tamberg's name on it, and that was a long time ago. So for us, the hardest part is building these bridges with interoperability, multi-vendor capabilities, integration, and interoperability. So I'm sure you'll hear about that from folks here, but for us, it's integrating with all that stuff with standards, interoperability, open API, support for other stuff to connect in is a big part of the story.
Right, and I want to jump in on that. Playing well with others is, I think, important because of the multi-generations of everything from email upwards that's deployed in the enterprise. So playing well with others is a critical piece of that. And there are different investments for that. It's APIs, it's plugging into these tools. Like we work well with Office 365, we work well with G Suite. So wherever you come from in the enterprise, whatever your productivity suite is, Stride just works. The other thing I think is access. You have to price these things in a way that is able to go from the front desk to the CEO. What good does it do to the enterprise if the development team is completely optimized and very productive when the HR team is not? So you have to find a model that deploys this to everyone so that you can actually gain the benefit of scale in an enterprise. So those are kind of two things we think about amongst others.
Yeah, I think I would like to add, so access is important, and certainly I think all of us wouldn't be here today if we didn't have integrations. I think some of you may know, a typical large enterprise will have 1,000 applications, and so integrating into those, I think, is obviously important for a team collaboration service. But I think when you're talking about transformation, certainly connecting to enterprise applications is transformative. But I think the other thing that is really transformative that we're seeing is a focus on the end user. I think at Slack, that's really what we've done over the last 4 years, is really every single decision that we make, I can tell you from a product perspective, has that end user in mind. We don't think necessarily about what is the most pervasive. What we think is what is going to be helpful for the end user. And working with those large enterprise customers, when I go in and I meet with customers and I meet with end users, certainly they say it's great not to have to connect to 12 applications in a day, and be able to find people across the organization. But when they get feedback inside this application that they love to use every single day, when their manager communicates with them using emojis, and they can actually relate with them as a human being, that is transformative. That, to me, is pervasive.
So to pick up on that user experience, what our customers tell us is that they would like to have one unified experience and not to context switch from app to app to app. So with Ring Central, what we find is our unified experience and our ability to have them given that one context, one persona, in voice, in video, in team collaboration, with emoji too, is what they really appreciate, and that's what gives them the efficiency that they're looking for. Right. Because right now, switching context and just moving from an app to an app, even though you get the integrations, of course, it's still when you're in a voice conversation and you want to be able to, at that same time, to collaborate with that team and possibly, send them a note, share a document. with RingCentral, you can do that, and we find that that's what our customers like. Having said that, look, this is a world of many apps, and we integrate. We have an open platform, an open API. Our app gallery is powered by integrations and applications built by our partners and customers. And some of you are in that app gallery.
Yeah, I think integration experience both are key for team collaboration and living in the wider IT environment. But I think it's also very important to not just focus on the one customer we are at that moment serving, but we need to think about the customer's relations to their partners and their customers. And so that's a multidimensional thing. We need to assure that that experience is not just applied to the one customer and not to their employees, but to their customers as well. And I think that's driving some complexity. And the experience, driving the right experience is key, because then you drive adoption and then you are able to move that customer in that journey with their customers onwards.
Mm-hmm. I did like the example you shared, Lori, about the, was it the CIO who added the email tag?
Yeah.
I mean, just sort of getting the pervasive mindset throughout the companies.
That's right, cultural change.
Yeah. Well, we know that's a big challenge for everyone, user adoption. One of the things, I'd like to switch subjects a little bit. If I look back at the history of the show, and Beth and I were talking about that earlier, this used to be PBX whatever year it was. And so you'd think about, well, how did that particular product fit into the strategy of the company at the time? And over the years, we've had unified communications. How did that fit in? So this is the question today is, how does team collaboration fit into a corporate's business communication strategy?
Yeah, happy to start. So number one, of course, we need to understand that introducing team collaboration just as an island probably doesn't work out that well. It serves that particular circle of users, but at the end we need to take care and pay attention to the overall company. So there is a need to integrate those things which are today still the lowest denominators, common denominators, which is mail and voice, right? So there's a strong need to integrate that into the team collaboration and make the work cross the environments as smooth and as seamless as possible. But also something which is really important to understand, and as we are sitting here, we shouldn't pay too much attention to ourselves, but to the wider digital workplace. So collaboration is not all and everything. Collaboration is a significant and important piece of the digital workplace, but there's much more. So it's our task to make that integration and to fit into the bigger picture, including all the business applications and all the other solutions being deployed at the customer side.
Interesting, a lot of heads nodding up here.
Yeah. I would jump into and add just the data. When you look at the changing workplace and you see that, 80% of all of information workers' time is in a collaborative nature. When you look at people have 4 times as many devices as they used to have, they're on twice as many teams as they used to be. The world is moving towards a more remote workforce. There's data that says that, by 2027, 70% of the world is going to be working in a freelance or remote style. And so I think what we have to do, and it's all of our job, to build tools that bring together collab and comms into that unified vision, where you don't think about them as independent things. The minimizing context switching is very real. It's every customer I talk to that the organization talks to, they're trying to avoid the collaboration overload, give people the tools that they need, and help them work in this new culture.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say for us, we view team collaboration as sort of the container or wrapper around a lot of these traditional unified communications products that are widely deployed in the enterprise. And I would say it's, the big ones are voice, meetings, video. And so a big focus for us has been to take our team collaboration product and deeply integrate it with our UC manager and our IP calling capability set and WebEx and our meetings portfolio and our video portfolio, so that a customer doesn't feel like they have to junk all that stuff and go move somewhere else. It actually gets, like I use a tagline, it gets better when you add the cloud. Like the team collaboration is a wrapper that takes those things in a lot of ways, gives them new life. So for us, if you sit inside of Cisco Spark and you do a one-on-one Spark call with someone, like it's using the on-prem UC manager if they've so configured it, but it adds all this additional wrapper around it by putting it in a space and persisting the history of the call and allowing you to have the chat and file sharing side channel and to easily escalate to a screen share and blah, blah, blah. So it's a wrapper around the stuff that you already have to make it better. That's our perspective.
And I'll riff on that. I think there are three things that we think and we recommend that people think in terms of enterprise strategy and adopting this in enterprise. And one of them is that. It's the spaceness of this. It brings things together. It's consolidation. And it's good for the user because there's less to context switch, like we've said already. But it's also good for the enterprise because it's consolidation. Consolidation generally means it's one thing that you either have to pay for, deal with, manage, troubleshoot, and so on and so forth. And that gives all the various actors here some agency, the user, the IT administrator, the person who's signing the check, who's the CFO. So it's all win-win across the board. The other two perspectives we think about is inside, outside. Collaboration is one of those places where people don't think about inside, outside, but in everything else in IT, security or so on, there's this thing about the trust inside and outside. The simplest example of this, though, is at Atlassian, we use exclusively Stride internally. Like, my CEO talks to me over Stride, and it's fast. We have an equation in our heads. Collaboration is faster than email, right? So it's fast, it's beautiful, it helps us organize and make decisions better. And of course, we still have the email gateway for everyone out there, right? So you have to think about it in a way, how do I optimize what's inside, and how do I optimize what's outside the corporate boundary? The last one is basically productivity. Like, we know that these mediums can be noisy, and so you have to give people some control. You have to give people the ability to, we call it the joy of missing out, JOMO. You have to give people the joy of missing out, able to step back, right, and actually do work. It's not good when collaboration takes 80% of your workers' time because you only have 20% to actually do work. How are you going to cure cancer if you do that? So our goal is to pull that time back and make it more effective, right? And I think that's one way to think about it because it only makes the user better, but it also makes the enterprise more profitable, faster, and more agile. So that's how we think about it.
So one thing to note for team collaboration, this is yet another, if it's a standalone, it's yet another app out there for administrators, for enterprise administrators to take care of, which as we hear from IT administrators, they would like one environment where they can administer the enterprise, which is what RingCentral enables them to do, and which you need to provide end users, you need to provide with exciting experience and apps they love to use and less context switching. Which you need to provide IT administrators with is empowerment so that they can administer complex business roles with ease, without having to jump into too many environments to configure the same user. So that they have ability to monitor security, monitor quality of service, get proactive alerts, have that enterprise enablement facilitated for them as the number of apps proliferate. And so this is why RingCentral's philosophy is to unify all of these modalities of communication into a single user experience and to a single service enablement environment for administrators.
Llan, if you don't
I was going to take a little bit different view on that question. So I have 20 years of experience in collaboration, starting from email to portals and then wikis and social. And one thing that I have learned, I'm not a very fast learner, but one thing that I've learned in 20 years is that collaboration cannot be forced from the top down. What we see, a true team collaboration environment, really starts with seeds inside your organization. What we see when I talk to CIOs, when I come in, usually we have 100, 200 teams, Slack teams that have already formed inside their organization. And then that's exactly actually why we released Slack Enterprise Grid about a year ago. That's a solution that I lead, where it gives those teams, what's really important is it gives those teams continued autonomy. right? Because the last thing you want to do as a CIO is come in and impose another strict collaboration on top of this, environment that they went out and sought out, right? And so with Enterprise Grid, it gives them autonomy, but it also gives centralized control. So you have your DLP and your e-discovery and enhanced encryption and all the things that CIOs, makes them excited, but you also have the teams being productive.
So you feel that's an advantage versus a disadvantage, not coming out of a legacy world and introducing a point solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is our key advantage, right? We've come at it from, like I said earlier, a user perspective. Our mission is to make working live simpler, more pleasant, and more productive, and that's the only thing that we focus on. And with that, I think that one of the things that's really key beyond just our focus on end users is the metrics that we use to judge ourselves by, right? When I report metrics to our executive board, I'm not looking at just number of accounts that have activated Slack or number of teams formed or something like that. That's less important. What's really important is NPS. We measure NPS from day one. 4 years ago, we started measuring NPS. What do Net Promoter Score? What do customers think about the software? Also, daily active versus weekly active users, right? Percentage of users who are using apps on a regular basis. If a collaboration solution is going to be transformative, these are the types of metrics that it has to move, not just logins.
Yeah, if I could just add though, actually two exceptions I would give to that. One are, like if you think about the transition from the postal service to email. Like there's a fundamental shift that happened where the world started emailing, but the post office didn't go away, right? So the post office continues to carry pieces of mail that are right-sized for that. But the world had to learn how to email, and they had to, change the behavior of doing that. And so I think it is incumbent of us to put the right tools out there that help with that journey and then show people the way. That's one piece. The CEO cultural one, having lived in the world of video, the thing that I have seen is when you do have a CEO or an executive who is strongly supporting and saying this is the way our company culture is going to operate, it really is a key point of the whole company getting in line with that. And what we found is that, people are resistant to video in a lot of cases, but if the CEO actually comes in and says, that's part of our culture, that's who we want to be, and sets that example, then the organization conforms around that, and you do get greater output and productivity.
Yeah, and I agree with that to some extent, and also video is becoming such a pervasive, basically transformational technology, RingCentral just announced collaborative meetings where it combines video with our collaboration, with and team messaging, and we're already seeing rapid adoption because in today's world, workforces are remote, they are distributed, yet they need to communicate. And the way to communicate for them is they need both voice, they need video, they need collaboration. Standalone, sure, great tools are always a delight to end users, but doesn't quite do the same job.
I feel like I want to violently agree with both of you because I think that the bottom-up thing that's happening, which is also benefits Stride, because we go into most organizations by self-selection as well, just like Slack, is an artifact, I think, of an early market in many ways. And when everyone gets religion, then it'll happen both ways, is how I think about it. So, we have to think about it as a function of time and go through this evolution with this category, making the right bets at the right time in terms of how we support adoption. So that's certainly how we think about it at Atlassian, which is, of course, we want to support bottom-up forever into infinity. But we want to give people who have cultural agency, cultural control, the ability to say, we believe in this, so therefore, let everyone align to this. And it's not fun to have command and control like that, but sometimes it's great. That's why we have organizations, that's why we have hierarchy. So our goal is to support it all. We certainly are kin in the sense that for us, if the user doesn't love it, I think this is a big difference between UC and what we're doing. If the user doesn't love it, it almost doesn't matter, right? You can't force, there's so many UC tools that went by the wayside because they were forced and there was no love. So we have to learn that lesson and move forward. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I want to agree with that and sort of like a little disagree with you. So, come on, we need a little disagreement on a panel. And I think you'll hear from all of us. All of us want tools that users love, and we're all looking at, I'm sure DAUs and WAU metrics, and we track this too, and all these kind of things. But there's a role for IT here, and in an environment in which it's entirely bottom up, and each pocket picks their own thing. You end up with like a little Slack, a little Spark, a little Stride, a little HipChat, and frankly, it's a mess. It's actually worse in that environment inside a company when you have tons of these different tools. And so to a lot of degree, the role of IT is to provide the guidance to their organization on the best way for the organization to collaborate effectively as a whole. And so, and I think that's a theme we're seeing at least, is there is a lot of these pockets of all of our tools in the organization, and we're seeing IT say, all right, this is getting a little out of hand, and I need to make sure that I pick a tool that I can roll out to my entire organization. And other factors come in there too that are important, right? Like integration with the rest of the environment and security and things like that. So I view that, I think you said it very well. It's about the maturity of the market, and this market is starting to mature, and that's when this, as is often the case, becomes a decision for IT to come in and make sure that the right tools are delivered to the users that they love. Because that I totally agree with. But they're not mutually exclusive. Bottom up and top down are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, enterprise grid is what you're saying.
No. I'm just kidding. Well, good, thank you. See, a little, like, it's not fun if we don't have stuff like that.
And let's not forget the customers of our customers, right? You, as a customer, are not able to control what your customers and partners are going to use. So living in the great team collaboration world is, of course, fun, right? No doubt about that. But at the end, you need to ensure that you are able to communicate with your customers and with your partners, and they are making you earn money, right? So you need to be able to interwork with them, to integrate with them, and so there might be customers being at the beginning of a journey, right? And you want to get them in as well.
I wanted to jump to an audience question, if you don't mind, Jim.
Sure.
Only because it is very apropos to what you're talking about right now, and that's interoperability. I mean, Jonathan, others, is the right user experience a single platform? Or will we one day see, Stride interoperating with Slack and with Glyph and Teams and Circuit, and Spark.
And Stride.
I said,
Oh, that's not.
anyways, the point being, do we, and not just integrations, but really real true interoperability?
So I think some degree of interoperability is inevitable, right? I mean, that we live in a world where we work with, people have to, applications have to be integratable and enable users to the way they want to work. Having said that, I think there's a place for one central communication and collaboration system, and then an open platform that allows some degree of interoperability. So for example, in Central, we integrate with Slack, we integrate with Skype, we integrate with Office 365. And in our app gallery, you'll see these applications being displayed side by side with integrations from Salesforce, that integrate with Salesforce and Box and a bunch of other business applications built by us and built by our partners and customers. And I think that's the way forward. So the key is to have an open platform with APIs, with SDKs, with full enablement that allows that interoperability to be enabled by the ecosystem that's built around you.
I agree with that fully. The one piece I would add to that is also making all the existing equipment out there work with it. And I do think that there is it's something that we all have to do to make sure that the previous investments are preserved. And so I do believe that interoperating with the investments that are out there is an important part of the story.
Let me add to this, and this is a topic that's like sort of near and dear to my heart and sort of my bread and butter. As many of you know, I am the primary author of the SIP spec, and I wrote all the standards on SIP-based and IAM and presence used by you and many others here. And so I get asked this, hey, Jonathan, like, you're going to go and like, is someone going to write like the spec on how to take my Slack client and plug it into like my Microsoft Teams server, like I had with email? Like, where's the IMAP or the SIP or the XMPP of team collaboration? Are we going to have that? And I think the answer is probably not, to be totally honest. I think in a lot of ways that that model requires a certain level of maturity and for the industry to sort of stabilize, to have standards that basically everyone is the same, because standardization is a homogenization process. And this technology is very evolving, very innovative, and there's differences between all these platforms. Everyone has slightly different information architectures and data models that make it difficult to have such a standard. What I think instead you will see is the next generation is very much like you said, which is I'm a big fan of, and we're a believer of, is sort of open APIs. Whereas if you take your system and they're well-defined and almost everyone is using REST and webhooks and these kind of things to expose the ability to send messages, receive messages, we have APIs to make a team, create a team, add users to team, remove users to team, all this kind of stuff. You can start to build bridges between these things, and we have them. So people build connectors between Cisco Spark and Slack, for example, that can post messages back and forth. And the industry has matured in certain technology areas that allow those things to be done relatively easily. But I think you'll find that you sort of that works okay, but not fabulous. And I'm being honest. I think this is good information for people to understand. Sort of the mixed environment where oh, can I have 10 people on Slack and 10 on Stride and 10 on Teams and 10 on Spark, and it's perfect together. I'm it'll be okay. Right, but you'll end up being, and this has always been our problem with standards, you end up with the least common denominator type of functionality, and if one person has a feature and the other doesn't, there's no magic, you can't gateway it. So I think the technology platforms have evolved, the nature and the role of standards and openness has evolved, and this is sort of where I think it's going.
I think the technology is quite important to make that happen with the open APIs and platforms, no doubt about that. But at the end, if you look to verticals, healthcare, assurance, banking companies, they are not focusing primarily on the collaboration communication workplace. They are focusing on their original purpose, which is helping people to get healthy and so on. So, and there, of course, they are living in a completely different world, and we here all together, we need to ensure that we are serving their needs in the best way. And of course, open APIs interfaces are helpful for that. And at the end, it's less important how we are integrating with each other, as long as we are sure that our customers are able to serve their main purpose and stay connected.
And one of the things I'd like to point to that is, in today's world, with all the team collaboration, with everything, with all the transformative technologies that we have, voice is still one of the main channels of communications. And voice, cloud-based voice systems are mission critical. And here at Essential, we think of everything has to be, modalities have to move around. They have to switch. Users have to be able to switch modalities. But if you think about it, most of communication today, business communication, in and outside the company is done over voice. And you need an enterprise voice system. And so once you build around that voice enterprise system, you build the rest of your platform with that in mind. And so team collaboration becomes team collaboration puts you in the center because it's so persistent, right? So it involves, you live in it, but yet don't forget that your mission critical system is in many ways your voice system, including text and other ways that customers are used to communicating with partners and in and outside the companies.
So unfortunately for the audience, we're going to end on agreement here. I completely agree. If you could not solve the interoperability between our tools, Jonathan, I don't know who could. I mean that seriously. I think that those worlds in the world of email, where we had SMTP and all those types of protocols, were true back when things like this technology came from government or came from EDU. That's no longer the case, obviously. And obviously, interoperability is important. I think that one of the things that's important beyond interoperability, again, is being able to work with your ecosystem of customers and within and throughout the organization. And so again, I go back to where we started off, the example of shared channels, where you can take two Slack teams from two different organizations and connect them and do work together. I'm really sorry that we don't have that protocol to connect a Teams organization with a Slack organization, but we're doing the best with what we have.
Well, I think you'll have APIs that help, and I think that's the difference. And to be, guys, I want to be clear on this one. So, like, I don't think there'll be like an IETF standard that allows the Slack client to plug into the Spark Cloud or the Teams to plug into Atlassian or whatever. Like, again, like IMAP and POP. Like, I don't think there's going to be an IMAP or POP. But I think everyone will have these open APIs that allow for some amount of message funneling and information sharing back and forth between the tools. So I think you can have a mix, but it will be a least common denominator problem, right? And again, we've seen this already in the UC world. I mean, I can't tell you how much, even with stuff that's fully standardized like SIP, we can't get stuff to go between organizations because you get reduced to like the thing that everyone implemented, and anything that else doesn't work, right? So I think you'll get sort of a little funnel through, so it'll be okay, but not great. And I think those connections are important to provide transitions, to provide connections with other teams that don't do that, but you can't expect this perfect experience. That's what you're not going to.
So my take on this, now that we have 16 seconds left to summarize, is that it's going to be a competitive environment out there, and people are going to have to say which product or products am I going to want from different vendors up on stage that best suit my needs. Our objective was to help educate you, to give you an idea of what these different vendors had to offer, and I hope this was helpful and educational to you. Beth, back to you.
I think I would just like to ask everybody to join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, guys.